Hello, everyone. My name is James Williams. I am Director of Programs with the Mobile Ecosystem Forum. Now, I appreciate many of you are regular attendees, viewers, listeners of our live webinars. You know exactly who we are, but we never assume anything here at MEF. We've been around 22 years. We provide our now 213 members with a truly neutral platform with which they can use to engage with each other and the industry. At the end of the day, our members are here to get their brand known around the world, to obviously grow their business, but doing so, it grows the ecosystem. But we've got to do all of this in a responsible, sustainable, and I mean that in the truest sense of the word, way which protects the end consumer. And don't forget, it's at the end of the day, it's enterprises, it could be government departments, it could be organizations of any size, shape and type around the world that ultimately pay so many of the bills that of all of us. Without them, there wouldn't be the content to send around the world, there wouldn't be the validation requirements, etc., etc. So the enterprises have a huge role to play as well. So I'd like to introduce Brad Greer from NetNumber here. Hi, Brad.
Hey, how's it going today, James?
I'm okay, thank you. Brad, I'd like to introduce yourself. Also, just introduce yourself. There was life before NetNumber, I assume, as well. Talk about that. Talk about NetNumber, what you do, and let's take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, James. So hi, everyone. As James mentioned, I'm Brad Greer. I'm our Senior Director of Data Solutions and Partnerships for NetNumber. I recently joined the company back in February. I have about a 17-year experience in identity data. I've helped some of the largest brands across the world figure out how to better acquire, acknowledge and understand data to streamline their processes, to keep people safe while they transact online. So I'm excited to be here and really talk about at a high level the ecosystem and some of the things that we can target and solve with fraud. And it's an exciting time right now at NetNumber. Most of you know us by way of our services registry and a lot of our global data solutions that we offer to many folks on the call today. But we have a brand new product that just released, and I'm testing it with clients directly, and it's truly solving a problem. So I want to touch on that for about 5 minutes at the end of the call. So I'm excited to be here. James, how about we just dive right in? Does that sound good to you?
Go for it. Okay. Sounds good to me. And I do love your brand name, NetNumber. Kind of says on the tin what you do. It's very, very easy to understand. And anything that has that is helpful. So let's roll, Brad. Go for it.
Absolutely. So I'm going to share some slides with everyone today. This isn't going to be a full interactive slideshow presentation, but I'm a visual learner, and many of us, we understand each other when we see diagrams and additional information. So I'm going to go ahead and let me hit there. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, I can. Okay. We can see it.
Okay. And apologies if you see me looking around, I have like 4 monitors going on. Don't ask. Data guy problems. So really, what our topic today is really fraud, the mobile ecosystem, and number verifications, right? So first off, we should probably start with just talking about it at a high level. When does fraud happen? James, at the Mobile Ecosystem Forum, you guys have, this is a hot topic and it's everywhere. Can you give us some examples of fraud as it pertains to the industry that you're hearing about? You're on these all the time. So wow. I thought it would be good for you to provide some examples.
I'll try not to take up the next 56 minutes because here at MEF, just on the SMS side of things, I'm aware that there's far more to life than SMS. There's voice as well. But just on the SMS side of things alone, MEF members have identified 15 different types of fraud. Now, front and center in the world of fraud at the moment is what many people are calling artificial inflation of traffic, or people are calling it when the enterprises in particular are left with a big financial headache because of fraud, artificial generation of traffic. So there's some very smart people, unfortunately, out there who are turning their knowledge, their intelligence, and their wily ways towards defrauding people out of their hard-earned money. And the targets at the moment are enterprises of all sizes who, at the end of the month, receive a huge SMS bill unexpectedly. So what's happening is people out there have bots employed to generate fake users. So let's say I've got a small business. Brad, you and I have got a small business. We think we're doing great, going great guns. We've got lots of new customers signing up with us, but little do we know that those new customers, those new signups are fake, and they've just been created to generate these one-time passwords, 2FA in particular. That's a real biggie out there. Smishing is a major thing, and MEF, as you know, is involved with the anti-smishing and smishing initiatives in the UK, Spain, and Ireland. So this is when people try and spoof the identities of major brands, and they try and entice people to think that it is a large package delivery company or someone like that to take their information and part individuals. This one's aimed more at individuals from their hard-earned cash. You've got that. A SIM swap fraud is a really, really, there's no fraud is good, but it's a very, very smart one. And being able to detect with how recently someone has swapped their SIM card out is a real massive identifier in the world of mobile. Because if someone's recently swapped their SIM card out and they're suddenly, that number is being associated with rather large purchases of things like widescreen TVs and things like that, then that's a huge red flag and something that needs to be investigated. So being able to detect SIM swap is absolutely huge as well. Brad, I could go on. There's so many.
Yeah,
that's the unfortunate thing. There's so many.
I think you've covered a lot, right? I mean, we're all thinking about this. We're obsessed with this, right? I'll even give you a North American example that just happened to me as an individual last week. Is I started receiving a bunch of phone calls from lending companies saying that I applied for a loan. I was like, okay, I don't think I need a loan. I don't know why I'm getting all of these calls. Well, I received an interesting call from a major fintech or someone posing to be a major.
That's more like it.
I answered the phone. They said that they received an application. They gave me a date. I asked them, I said, well, who do I talk to about who filled out this application? And how do I know the date and the time and the IP address, because I didn't fill out an application. And they scrambled, kept putting me on hold. They came back with the Better Business Bureau for this fintech company name. And I'm like, oh, okay, I thought I was talking to you. Why are you giving me the Better Business Bureau phone number, which is a big bureau in the United States, right? That basically reports or helps consumers raise issues, right? And they kept going back and forth, and then finally they just gave me the corporate number to this company. Okay, that's a big red flag. So upon investigating, the call was spoofed, right? Which, sometimes legitimate companies spoof calls for whatever reasons, but in a lot of cases, spoof calls are an indicant of fraud, right? So I kept investigating, and I also looked in my email, and I actually saw in my spam folder an email that was at gmail.com that was actually this fintech's name. So it was the fintech name at gmail.com and saying that I had applied for a loan and been qualified. So fraudsters are getting smart. They're using not only phone communications, text messages, but they're also tying that back to emails, just like we do, to streamline user experience.
Well, Brad, dare I say and interject here, but when it comes to MEF events, when people sign up for MEF events, we have a huge number of people signing up with a Gmail address. And you're thinking, it's like anti-spam and anti-fraud in our event attendance. And thinking, okay, are all these people signing up with Gmails? Are they legit? Are they real, genuine, or is something suboptimal going on? And it's a little bit different though with us. And what we've actually found is it is a lot of, you do a bit of digging, it is legitimate people from the industry. It's just that they have a Gmail account dedicated for events so that they don't get they don't get spammed or don't get what they feel would be spam from events organizers. So this whole area, and we're going to talk about it, I'm sure, of false positive as well, is a real problem for the industry, as there is more fraud, and that fraud is creative. These false positives, because it's easy to think, okay, someone coming along to a MEF event with a Gmail account, when they're purporting to come from a bona fide company where we know the domain name is XYZ.
Yep.
It can't be real, but it actually is. So it's a funny old world.
Yeah, you know, and I guess that proves the point, right? Is fighting fraud and identifying fraud. The fraudsters are using a total ecosystem now. And that might not have been the case about 15 years ago, 17 years ago when I entered the business. They were taking little pieces of compromised information and seeing how far they could get with it. Now they have more of a package of everything about you. And that's basically, and other webinars and events that I've spoke at, talking about how your data is harvested, right? And collected. Well, now they have enough data to really tell you, match different identity elements about you and trip our systems and get through with the fraud. So that comes back to really talking about the ecosystem now that we've set a baseline of some examples. So I wanted to share with everyone how us at NetNumber, we think about the ecosystem and the way that NetNumber plays in the ecosystem. So if you visited our website, you'll see keywords like provision, route, and trust. That's where really our product lines are focused. But applying that to a phone number or user journey becomes a little bit more required to create an ecosystem. So what I have here is in these four little bubbles, you have a step-by-step process of what really goes in to a phone journey or an end user journey in an ecosystem. You have, first off and foremost, there's always an onboarding process, right? Whether you're onboarding new phone numbers, whether you're collecting some sort of end user information, there's always an onboarding process. It could be as simple as an end user going to a website and providing some information, right? It can be various ways. This is just a roll-up term. Then what happens as a phone number or a user goes through the ecosystem is there's some sort of communication band. Well, in our world, that's usually made by a telephone, right? There are some communication bands by emails, but normally we see phone numbers. So then you go to the enablement part, which is step 3 here. Enablement is really where all the transacting happens. People sign up for services, people buy things, people make purchases, or based off of that communication, some sort of transacting is happening, right? And then as service providers, we have a responsibility to protect all of that information, the people involved, everything going through the journey. So what I've kind of created here is a chart of all of that, right? Well, this is what netnumber provides. At the provision level, which is more centric towards onboarding and communications, we have a services registry that enables you to verify overrides and terminations. We have a product that helps you evaluate connectivity with phone numbers. We have services that help you with data services that help you with authentication. Then really, when you move on to that funnel, we have communicate and enable. Really, that's where all the routing of communications exists, right? Well, we can validate your line types and operator information to make sure, as James mentioned earlier, that you are routing SMS and voice calls to the correct operators and being charged appropriately. Also streamlining your service. And then at step 2, we also have services that help you ensure connectivity before you make that call, or understand why after you make that call or send that message. And then it all comes back to trust, right? That's where enablement and protect meet. That's where most of the fraud that happens today exists, right? We have services that monitor connectivity, the flag and block bad actors, the detect phone activity changes. So this is where it really becomes important as it pertains to the fraud element to the title. This is a total ecosystem. So how netnumber really designs products is we design products that gives you data insights every step of the way. And the reason why is because when you think about a total ecosystem, you really have to have data plugged in on your total universe in order to capture and understand when that fraud happens. James, maybe give some examples. You're well more connected in this. Okay, so after we establish an ecosystem, there are additional services, right, that other companies offer. Can you kind of talk about after you collect all of this data and you start identifying potential fraud pain points, some of the services that exist in the market today?
Okay, so first of all, let's talk about data as a whole and how much data is being collected by organizations out there. There's a vast amount of data being organized. And Brad, I don't know about you, but there's different research out there. And the first point is that I'm hearing up to 90% of this is what's called dark data. So this is data that's being collected, but it's not actually being used for anything. Yeah. So it's not actually being quantified, used, actioned, focused, and moved on to something. So the key thing when it comes to the new services and everything is actually having the data to use. But the problem is there's so much data being generated. It's about knowing which bits to use, which bits are of value. And if I can just go back one step and just mention that a phone number, for me personally, I've had my mobile phone number now for over 15 years, the same number. And that piece of information alone as a service, just knowing how long someone has had that phone number. So James Williams has had that phone number for 15 years. That piece of information alone, the tiniest little piece of information, is supremely valuable. So just going back again to what we have talked about before ourselves directly before the webinar is simplicity is key, and just even little nuggets of information on their own can be supremely valuable. And you ally those, the power of them can be absolutely monstrous for that sort of positive way. But when it comes to the actual services side of things, there's just so many uses. You're talking about here the services for number intelligence as a whole, yeah?
Exactly.
Okay, so services for number intelligence. Number one thing, I set up a business. Let's say myself and Brad, use that example again. We set up a business. We've got a database of numbers. The most basic thing is look at the database integrity. And so much of that still isn't done by so many enterprises out there. They're trying to deliver content to people they think are still customers, or mobile numbers they think that are still in service, but they're not in service at all. Or they're definitely not with the mobile operator they think they are with. So as a result of that, a simple database check, it's a service at the end of the day, a simple database check to determine a number's validity and when that number lives can save businesses so much money from their business messaging budget, whether that's SMS or when it comes to a call routing or whatever it might be. So that's the most basic service, just checking a database and going from there. But with that number intelligence, I mentioned I've had the same number for 15 years. That piece of information alone is absolutely golden. And the way things have happened, and I've seen that change personally over the years, that now your mobile phone number is becoming just as important as for an organization or a government authority, whoever it might be, to authenticate and verify that James really is James, than my passport, or if we had in the UK, we don't, ID cards. But it's just as valuable as my passport alone. So being able to package that into a service for authenticating and for verifying is important. And in the US, I know there's been a huge move with gambling, I think it is, to verify this age verification that someone really is. It's above the age of 18, I think it is, for gambling now.
Yeah,
that they really are.
Something like,
sorry, 21 is the same as alcohol. Sorry, yeah, that's right, 21. So this whole age verification, it's a minefield for poor businesses. And if they get caught selling alcohol or allowing people onto a online gambling platform who aren't 21, they can get hammered and hit with massive fines. And if I'm a small organization, game over, I'm sunk. So these are just such basic examples of services, even before you really drill down into more complex use cases, which ally I've just talked about individual pieces of information. Just individual pieces on their own are so valuable, but you mesh them together in something like you've created, and the value is incalculable. But the thing is, Brad, and I really want to know, I'm a champion really of the small and medium-sized organizations. Is this something, I know you're going to be talking about your solution at the end, but is what you're doing accessible for small and medium-sized companies? So my startup I've created, is it accessible for me? It's not just something reserved for large companies.
It's accessible. It's for everyone. And that's one important thing. Now you did make my fraud antennas come up when you were talking about your phone number being established for 15 years. Now, one would think, okay, so, and I'm thinking like fraudster, guys. I swear I'm not a fraudster, by the way.
Look, you've got to think like one in order to protect. So I'll let you off. Yeah.
So you've had your phone number for 15 years. Yep. Would you say because your phone number's been exposed for 15 years that you are more sustainable to encounter some sort of fraud?
Do you know what? That's like a really good way of putting it, actually, because I've been around. I'm more susceptible to fraud because more organizations have got it, probably resold my data 1,000 times. The answer is yes, 100%.
So let me just take you through a story. We're just going to make up a story about fraud here. Okay. So James gets his phone number for 15 years ago. He uses it everywhere. He uses it on his bank accounts. He uses it on his utility bills. He puts it on his business cards. He fills out web forms, to Sports Illustrated because he's an avid football fanatic,
It's
right?
Top Gear or Autocar, not football, it's cars. But yes,
Okay.
you were 100% on point until that point. Yeah. But all
so
real.
he exposes all this information everywhere. It's just sitting around in databases. The world only knows about 20% of breaches that actually happen, is suggested by some of the major companies that work in breach data. And so basically, let's speed it up. Let's say that James enters into your ecosystem by way of phone number. You're streamlining communications to James. We get to the enable process, right? Well, at the enable process, James, signs up for services, enters in his account information. Then, all those services are exchanged, and now we're at protect. A fraudster gets a hold of James's phone number, conducts a SIM swap, right? Moves James's connectivity to to the fraudster's device. Changes James's address, starts getting all of the goodies James orders through that website. James figures it out and reports it to the service provider. The service provider is scratching their head. How did this happen? This is where NetNumber comes in today with a lot of clients, is this kind of fraud just happened, right? Well, the first thing that we notice is they're not setting up an ecosystem. They're catching the fraud after it happens, right? If they were integrating all of these data elements, they would be able to track potentially where it went wrong with James.
And that's the problem, Brad, because with James, they're going to blame James. Has James done something wrong? Has he exposed too much data himself? And then the blame game starts. And there's so many people see this, especially with, I'm hearing from a lot of MEF members, it's financial services companies and mobile network operators, and then the consumer, so James, is in the middle.
Yep.
And it's like, I've done nothing. And then the mobile operator goes to the financial services provider, the bank, the credit card provider I use to pay. Yep. And it all starts rocking and rolling, and it's not good.
And I mean, artificial intelligence is a big topic now. AI is in every industry, every market. There's so many emerging solution providers, but really it comes back to the data. Right.
I was about to say, because this is the thing, Brad, so many people, they use, like in the world of messaging, they say, oh, this is omni-channel. It's not, it's multi-channel. It's not seamlessly threaded into one conversation using multiple channels. And people for years have been saying, hey, we use AI. It's not big data. So AI has been something thrown around to look cool at the end of the day. And if you look around and all the investments being made and the plays being made by big investment houses, actually, who do you go with for AI? And actually, a lot of people are betting on big established companies who already have established processes and everything, who are now implementing this new technology, because it's a minefield, really.
Basically, what happens in AI is if you don't have the total, your total population categorized by key data elements, when fraud happens, you have nothing to model to track back on why and how to block it from your system. And so I guess that's really the point of the ecosystem, right? Is James could be more prone to fraud because he's had a phone number for a long time, right? And it's been exposed. But how do you track that? Well, and how do you look out for other fraudsters that are targeting maybe me in the same system, right? it's by having good data plugged in as you connect to it, and being able to, you don't need a fancy AI model to really run this, because we are in the business of communications, right? So we already know the data that we need. It's a matter of looking and tracing back when fraud happens and updating your processes and your interpretations of the data available. And really, that's what NetNumber is all about, is those data services that capture information about your total population. That's why a lot of our products are global. It's why a lot of our products are API driven, so that you can touch on that in real time. So I thought, James, maybe from here, we're about 25 minutes in. If you have any questions or comments on the ecosystem before we move on to explaining a new and exciting product.
Okay, I do. So we just talk generally. So Brad, you've been around 17 years in the industry. I've been around telecoms, unfortunately, a lot longer than that in telecoms. And fraud isn't new. Fraud is not new. If we look at the largest frauds in the world, it's actually in the world of advertising, ad fraud. And so much of content and advertising fraud, guess what you've got mixed in with that? You've got messaging in there as well, because messaging is very much the bearer channel, shall we say, of the initial fraud, whether it's an SMS or could be dare I say, could be a chat app message as well, because we talk so much about fraud in SMS and voice messages, and we keep forgetting that there's so many chat apps out there, but no one channel, email, chat apps, SMS, voice is bulletproof. So no one channel, but we're talking a lot about voice and SMS, I know here. But from your perspective, what are the most common risks in today's mobile telecoms landscape from what you've seen the past 17 years, and clearly what you're seeing with NetNumber? What are the most common ones from your perspective?
Yeah, so risks is really, you touched on it a little bit earlier. One risk is really around efficiency of services, right? Knowing that operator and line type when you transact, right? And basically starting there, right? So another risk that we see is understanding really the connectivity and reachability of a phone number before engagement happens. That's a big risk to not only telecommunications provider, but anybody in the identity space, really, that's dealing with that level of sensitive consumer or business information. Really, I would say that those are the biggest risks. Is the technology demand is moving so much faster than the data that we are integrating to support that, and the models that need to be built in order to block that fraud. So I would say that that's probably the two biggest risks that I see that I try to work with clients to resolve on a day-to-day basis.
Now, what about the risk of increasing regulation? So you're in the US, and we know the FCC rolled out. They went big on voice calls and robocalling. I myself here, this is my wonderful fixed line phone, and I can personally attest to the fact that 90% of the calls on this suboptimal. Let's just put it that way. So I barely ever bother answering this. And unfortunately, I'm not alone. But that's the voice side of things. So Stir Shaken came along in the US. That was the response from the industry. And it was much vaunted as being, this is the silver bullet, it's going to fix robocalling. Isn't it awesome? Let's roll it out across the world.
Yeah.
It's had a bit of an impact. It hasn't had a major impact, because at the end of the day, it's a framework. It's a technical framework. It's not an actual solution. Yeah. But now in the US, the FCC has picked up on SMS, and SMS is coming under the microscope, but it's not just in the US. So in the UK, Ofcom, the regulator over here in the UK, has picked up on the same thing about SMS. And indeed, the Home Office, a government department, was looking at the area of SIM farms and just asking trade organizations, big messaging players, all about, for example, SIM farms. So the regulators are really starting to get interested in the world of messaging and SMS as well as voice. What are the risks there of the regulators starting to get very involved in this?
The risks are, well, point one for your business is the risks are very simple. Either you have data services embedded to where you're keeping phone numbers safe and running fraud checks against phone numbers, or you don't and you're subject to fines, right? So I would say the overall business risk really is overhead costs. I mean, in order to be proactive is actually cost effective to your model.
I was going to say, so proactive can be self-regulation, and this is certainly what MEF is attempting to do with its Trust in Enterprise Messaging Scheme, the Business SMS Code of Conduct, the anti-smishing registries. In the US, you've got the 10DLC, the 10-digit long code program, the campaign registry. You sit behind the campaign registry along with Aegis Mobile, so you're very, very active in that, in the anti-fraud initiative in the US, all over the US as well. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's self-regulation. And isn't that better than if a major authority comes in and mandates something? I think there's plenty of experience across other industries, such as payments, to see that.
And you know, I'm no expert on legalities, right? I'm a data guy, but I will say this, that anytime I've seen or read through case studies of the legalities or violations, one thing that is obviously unclear in most instances is there's no explanation of the process or the data used to combat or to identify, and then that's when fines are imposed. So if you read through, I know here the FCC publishes some of their fines and the specifics to that, and then there's also a legal forum that everything goes through. And if you look through some of those, and you really read them and think about them deeply from an operational standpoint, you'll notice that so many things are missing if you go there and think about the data. And I think that a lot of times that's why the FCC comes down so hard. You know, and that's kind of what's important for me to continue evangelizing about the ecosystem is you got to get something in process, especially, you know, stir shaken again is a great process, but still there needs to be more knowledge base when engaging.
But that's exactly it, Brad. It's a process, it's a framework, it's not technical solution. That's at the end of the day, and that's the thing. So it was picked up by the marketeers and go, whoa, here we go, here's the wonderful solution, off we go, we've got it licked, we can rest, we can kick back in Cancun with our margarita or whatever it is. No, you can't, and that's very, very clear to see. So
absolutely. So any other comments before we go into what's new at NetNumber?
No, go for it, because I'm sure I've got other things which will come along, but you've been wanting to do this since the moment we started, so go on. What's new with NetNumber?
Our team
the big reveal.
Put in
go for
so
it.
much great work and thought logic in this, so I'm just ready to show it to everybody.
Go for it.
And get it out. So really leading up to it, and the FCC was actually a good transition point, because you know, in the US, there are requirements coming about that you have to do some sort of phone number check, right? I'm not going to go into the details of all of that, but really you should be knowing phone numbers that are entering into your company. So this is a perfect point to talk about Numericheck. Okay. Numericheck is our newest product line. Our marketing team sent out kind of a LinkedIn post not just shy of a month ago to really start sharing that, because we were testing and almost ready for production. Well, we are now 3 weeks into production and have several clients already onboarded. But what Numericheck really is it's a proprietary trust index that is designed to rate the validity, reachability, and connectivity of any phone number anywhere and in real time. What does that mean? You now have an index or a rating of every single phone number you're engaging with. You're ensuring that it's valid. You're interpreting whether it's reachable or connected in real time. That's state of the art. That touches every market out, even outside of the telecommunications space. I can think of fintech, e-commerce, everyone needing this service. What this really enables you to do is it enables you to understand the quality of phone numbers as you engage with them. It's a real-time API, right? Phone numbers change. They can change from day to day. They can change in 1 minute, right? This gives you the connectivity that you need to be able to take back those insights to really not only improve efficiency, but really understand if there is someone really on the other end of that phone, right? So you're all thinking, I know that there's probably a technical audience on here, and keep in mind, we'll go a layer deeper. There are
But Brad, dare I interject and say the product name, very simple. Again, you know what it does, so I like it.
The output, very simple too, which is the next slide. So what is really the trust index, right? Well, it's a numeric point system that we take into consideration our 20 years of experience in building our NetNumber network. We have all kinds of phone attributes, right? Well, what we do is we really rank each phone number anywhere from a 0 through 5 score in the trust index. And so I really call it a ranking or rating. It's not really a score. But really what goes into that, that's what everybody's thinking, is NetNumber. We have, in the last 20 years, we have figured out a lot in global phone number standardization and hygiene practices. All that's being baked into our Numericheck service, making sure that everything, every attempt to understand whether a phone number is valid or invalid is going into this. Then we have a lot of observations and phone number behavioral patterns in our rich internal network here at NetNumber. Then another thing that's really being baked into that is global real-time communication networks. And those are both internal and external. Really understanding what's being done with a text message or voice is really what that is all about. So talking through the scoring, or better yet, ranking system that we have in place is it's really just like the colors are suggesting. Think about you driving. I think in almost every country there's a red and green light, maybe a yellow, or at least that I've driven in. Yeah. So think of it as this way. You have zeros coming back. Well, when you're driving, 0 says stop, block, invalid, unreachable. We can't verify anything, right? When zeros come back, that's what we're really recommending as best practices. Then we have ones. Those are all the caution signs flying around you. Hey, you better stay over here. If not, you're going to drive off a cliff, right? That's what really the ones are meaning, right? There's not any kind of proof of activity or any identifiable attributes exist to make the phone number reachable. So watch out for that cliff over there. You might just drive right off. And then we have the yellows, right? Well, that's a yellow light. What do we do as we're approaching a yellow light? We might look in both directions and make sure it's safe to proceed. We might decide to stop because the yellow light is stale and I don't want to get another ticket. Southern California, those are really expensive, guys. So really what yellow is designed to do is to say, hey, think about it, right? Think about it before you proceed, right? And then you have all of the different stages of green. We have a lighter green, which basically represents a stale green light. You know, you're like, okay, it could be changing yellow soon. So we probably want to think about that a little bit more. Well, that's where a phone number has recent activity through our networks, but limited variables can be identified. So it's still green, but within lower confidence. And then we'll move on to the 4s and 5s and so on, right? The 5s, not very many numbers ever make it to a 5. So it's
I
important.
hope mine would.
Well, we'll see, James. 15 years is a long time, my friend.
But actually, there's a question.
If you're sending text messages and making voice calls, I would say you're a 5.
And I have to admit, I do my best to support the industry. And every time I get an option from a brand, how do you want to be communicated? If I choose email or SMS, I'm sorry, email providers out there. I never choose email. I never choose voice. I always choose SMS though. So there we go. I'm a good one. But the question from someone actually in the audience:
Sure.
Should James change his mobile phone number? Because I've had it 15 years. Because I've had it 15 years, does that ultimately put me at more risk or secure his device by updating passwords? I do. Sorry, folks, but I do update. I don't update a cycle through. I have to admit, like most people, certain passwords, but I do update and change those fairly regularly. I think better than most. But should I ditch my number and just go for something new and think, do you know what? I'm going to start again from fresh with a clean slate. What would you say?
Here's my advice: is have you detected any fraud happen in the last 15 years in association with your phone number?
No, I have to admit the only fraud that has taken place was I had a high interest short-term loan taken out in my name. But when I got my hands, because I found myself trying to remortgage, and I couldn't remortgage with my banking provider who I'd been with at that time. I'd been with them 30 years. And my credit record was shot to pieces because of that one, we call it in the UK, payday loan with an extortionate interest rate of 200%. And when I actually saw it, the mobile phone number the person, whoever, had used wasn't even mine. So that's lax processes. And then the other example is a credit card provider, a well-known company. I was receiving a new credit card, and actually fraud was done in my name before I'd received it. So clearly that was a breakdown of something internal. So the answer, Brad, is no, I haven't. In 15 years, I actually haven't.
Then why change something that works and that you're comfortable with? You know,
okay.
I guess that's actually a great question. You know, if I'm saying 15 years, your phone number's been exposed in association to your identity, but nothing's happened, right? And so it could be that no one's targeting that, right? It's important to think about changing phone numbers when something continually happens to you. Well, us as service providers, we need to know the details, right? And all of the data coming back to that to keep you safe and protect you while you're doing all those transactions, right? And so part of that comes to, you know, to running these checks and involving, you know, industries. And and giving them best practices and guidelines.
Brad, what would you recommend? Again, take this example. You and I started the business, so we're brand new. We don't have a track record practically anywhere. We've both got brand new mobile numbers for our business. I suppose we'd run the risk straight away of being a zero. If we're new, what would you recommend we could do? If you're new, you're legit, you're doing the right thing, what can we do to try and, we'd never be a 5 overnight, I get that. But what could we do to push us into the 2s or 3s?
Yeah, so basically the 2s and 3s will happen naturally as you establish a footprint with a phone number. It's important to also understand that netnumber is actually a provider of services that detect operation and line type changes, right? So I will say, in a way, that is considered in your overall ranking. So basically what this service is really doing is it's telling you whether or not the phone number is connected and reachable in real time. So there are other elements in that help us determine behavioral connectivity. And so really not necessarily would you be a 0, or we would be a 0 if we got new business phones. Chances are we've worked with some of the wonderful people on this call to establish those phone numbers, right? Or we have, it's highly unlikely that the phone numbers being ran anywhere behind the scenes for the first time.
Yeah, that's a good point, because the number ranges, if the number hasn't been used for 6 months, it goes back into the number range and is recycled. So that's another good point as well.
And I will say this about phone numbers is like I kind of alluded to before, is phone number connectivity changes rapidly sometimes. So services like this have to be ran more often. So like when I've talked about those 2s that are more like decide whether you want to proceed or with caution, you can run a 2 and in a few days later you'll see them appear as a 1 or a 3.
I suppose what really adds an extra dimension to this as well is the increasing usage of big number ranges for virtual numbers. So for example, ride sharing companies, Uber, Lyft, or food delivery companies like Uber Eats, or it could be Deliveroo, or whomever, wherever you are, could be Grab if you're in Asia, wherever you're around the world. The drivers there don't want to give their phone number away. I, as the client, don't want to make my number fully accessible. So therefore, you meet in the middle, and you've got a virtual number allocated for the duration of that ride or for that food delivery. So they're coming. What happens to those? Actually, it's an interesting point, because they're being recycled constantly after one ride. It could be half an hour, They're constantly being recycled. Where would they be in this index?
Yeah. So it depends on the way the phone number is being reported and serviced, right? Those phone numbers are usually issued in certain blocks or sequences, right? And so we think about that when we're putting together this overall ranking.
Okay. Fantastic. That makes sense. So if it's a known block and if it's known, it's being used by a known company, then there's an element of trust there because it's for a particular use case. Okay, that makes sense. I know you can't go into the details, so I can't ask you about that, but I get the idea. Okay.
I can't tell you what's in the stew, James.
I know.
It's really good.
I know, but there we are. But no, it makes sense. Okay, but you can. It's trust. All comes down to trust at the end of the day. But trust is a two-way street, Brad, and of course, the brands want to know that Brad is Brad, James is James, but it goes the other way round. And if a brand is contacting me, I want to know that that content is really from the brand. I want to know that that phone call really is from my bank or whomever it might be from. And
what this ranking really does is it tells you how to maneuver from here forward with the phone number, and that's a good baseline, right?
It's a great baseline. Yeah. It's good.
Requiring, if your business is, let's just say that you operate a website that sells auto magazines. You go through, you enter in your information as an individual, right? So you might OTP, you might do some sort of two-factor authentication or silent verification that some providers are selling now, and all of these different things, right? But what happens after that with that phone number sitting there? And this is a perfect service for that. It could also be that your OTP fees are high with your service provider. Maybe you want to run this, it comes back like that. So it's a very fast service. Maybe you want to run it before you pay for an OTP. Then it becomes an efficient case, right? So
you're right, and that's a really, really good point. We talk about it. Members talk about it a lot, this whole area of commercial models and SMS. There's a lot of instability in the commercial models in SMS, and SMS, so much of SMS has been used by businesses for two-factor authentication. And it still is a great means of doing 2FA, but with that the commercial model changes and everything like that, I want to use it, but running your check first to really make sure, okay, that number, has it got some integrity and trust associated with it to start off with before you actually send that 2FA? Why not do it?
And another point here that I wanted to make it clear on is this includes landlines and mobiles, right?
Perfect.
And so your fixed and mobile lines doesn't matter. And that's probably a true innovative part, because I know a lot of products that exist today that are somewhat comparable to this are either limited to one or the other. And, in a way, those zeros, kind of think of it as a way to recommend blocks for mobile phones, right? So that kind of adds to some of those do not originate products that exist in the market today.
Perfect. Brad, we're coming up to the end of the webinar, so I'd like to thank you. I'd like to thank NetNumber. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, because it has been a chat and a discussion. I think my key takeaway is keep things simple. Keep things very, very simple. And as long as everything has the right commercial model, you've got the solution available. We have numeric check available now, as you said. You're doing those tests with certain companies. You're going to be rolling this out and going forward. And just that simplicity alone is absolutely golden. And the key thing, I keep saying it, around the world, there are over 300 million registered companies. Go to the company registration schemes around the world, whether it's the US, the UK, you add up all the companies, that's over 300 million listed companies, never mind the others who aren't listed. That's a heck of a lot of companies who want to be registered, who want to have that feeling and the halo of trust and protection around them. And if they can use a solution like this as well, then absolutely fantastic, because we do not want that digital divide between the haves and the have-nots, the big guys and the little guys. We don't want that. And anything we do to even the playing field, and this certainly looks to me like something that could be great for that.
Yeah, and for those of you not affiliated with NetNumber today, I mean, reach out. If there's something that you see valuable in this, let's test it. Let's figure it out together. The only way that we're going to improve the world is by keep on pushing for innovation and understanding everything we can about the information that's entering into our systems.
Exactly. Fantastic. Brad, thank you for joining me. It's lovely. You are at the start of your working day. I'm not. It's only 6 p.m. here. So All the best, and thank you for your support, as always, with all things mobile ecosystem forum NetNumber.
Absolutely. Pleasure to spend time with everyone. Thank you so much.
Most welcome. All the best. Bye. Thank you, everybody. Bye.